Long shot, natural style, capturing the tense conflict scene of overweight commanding HOA Karen committing the crime at scene, with a wooden sign reading "Justice on my land" in bold handwritten letters. I never imagined that a simple weekend getaway to my family's lakeside cabin, the one my grandfather built with his bare hands after returning from Korea, would turn into a war zone of entitlement and corruption. The sun hung low over Silverpine Lake, painting the water's surface in molten gold as I rounded the final gravel bend on that dusty driveway. My heartbeat pounded like artillery fire, not from the joy of returning home, but from dread because I'd been warned that Holly heavy-handed Pendleton, the self-appointed Karen of Pinecrest HOA, had escalated her vendetta against me beyond parking tickets and petty fines. She'd spread rumors that I was selling my cabin to a commercial resort developer, that I planned to dredge the shoreline to build docks. None of it was true. I simply wanted to spend time with the memories etched into every plank of oak flooring and every creak of the attic steps. As I stepped from my truck, the air grew unnaturally still. On the front steps, Holly stood, her arms crossed, face flushed crimson under her signature wide-brimmed sun hat. Behind her, two uniformed deputies hovered, their badges gleaming faintly in the waning light. "Sir, step away from the property," one deputy barked. Holly's lips curled into a triumphant smirk as she called into her radio. "We have trespassing in progress at 1427 Silverpine Road." My protest caught in my throat as I stared at her swollen silhouette, her rhinestone-studded necklace swaying like a noose. In that moment the world tilted. The cabin, my refuge, felt like hostile territory. Memories of childhood laughter faded under the weight of her accusation. I tried to explain. "This is mine. My deeds recorded, my taxes paid. I've lived here since I was 10. But Holly interrupted, voice loud enough to shame the birds into silence. "You have violated HOA bylaws by parking on the gravel too close to the road." She snapped her fingers and the deputies advanced. Panic surged through me, but I refused to relent. I planted my feet, squared my shoulders, and looked her dead in the eye. "You're harassing me. This is illegal." The deputies hesitated. They'd seen enough disputes to know when they were being used. Holly's glare flickered, uncertainty creeping into her domain of control. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a notification from the county recorder. "Notice of cancellation of Pinecrest HOA charter effective immediately." I held it aloft, voice ringing with vindication. "Your HOA doesn't exist anymore." The deputies looked at each other, then at Holly. Her face paled as the realization crashed over her. In a final desperate move, she lunged toward me, knocking the wooden sign from its post. I caught it mid-fall, plank stained with the words I'd scrawled that morning. "Justice on my land." The deputies stepped in, gently restraining her. Cameras, mine and my neighbor's, clicked wildly, capturing every humiliating second. Holly's ruby lipstick smeared as she struggled, her orders dissolving into angry gasps. The sun dipped below the treeline, and the cabana lights winked on, illuminating the scene. A crowd had gathered, cabin owners, local journalists, county officials drawn by the commotion. They cheered as the deputies read Holly her rights under the new statute that had just invalidated her authority. In a dizzying cascade of moments, her dominion collapsed. Rumors of embezzlement, forged signatures on HOA votes, coercion of elderly members all surfaced in a flood of public outrage. By midnight, news trucks lined the driveway recording my statement. How I'd fought back against her tyrannical rule and how justice had finally prevailed. My hands trembled as I signed the county documents to reclaim every cabin under the old charter's umbrella, restoring my neighbors' rights to fish, kayak, and park freely. The lake, once silenced by her restrictions, seemed to breathe again, its ripples glinting under the moon. As the crowd dispersed and the deputies escorted Holly to her cruiser, I sank onto the porch steps, sign in hand, heart pounding with relief and righteous fury. The cabin door creaked open, welcoming me home at last. Would you have stood your ground like I did? Share your thoughts, right or wrong. As the deputies guided Holly Pendleton toward the cruiser, the air crackled with a mixture of triumph and disbelief, neighbors emerging from shadowed porches to murmur, point, whisper confirmations of all the petty cruelties they'd endured in silence. I pressed the wooden sign against my chest, its jagged edges rough beneath my palm, recalling the moment I'd carved those words in a fit of righteous fury just hours before. "Justice on my land." Now that sign felt less like a snub and more like a talisman against every entitlement-fueled injustice Holly had inflicted. My lungs burned with cold August air as I remembered her ledger of violations. How she'd fined Mrs. Alvarez $50 for hanging laundry on a Sunday. How she'd threatened to foreclose on Mr. and Mrs. Patel because their garden gnome encroached on a half-inch into the easement. And I felt a surge of vindication as flashbulbs popped across the lawn. Camera phones captured every angle. Holly's rhinestone necklace catching the gleam of police lights, her waddling gait as she was escorted away, her lipstick smudged in a sad, crooked smile that splintered her once formidable aura of power. Meanwhile, the crowd surged forward like a tidal wave of relief and long-suppressed anger, neighbors clamoring to reclaim the freedom she'd stolen for years. I took a step toward the front steps of my cabin, heart pounding so loudly I feared it would spook the night itself, and announced in a voice carrying across the assembled throng. This cabin was built on hard work, community, and respect for the land. It's time we honor those values again. The applause was immediate, thunderous, a rolling chorus echoing off pine trunks and the placid surface of Silver Pine Lake. An elderly man with a walker hobbled forward, tears glistening in his eyes, and grasped my hand. "Thank you for standing up," he whispered. "We've waited too long." I nodded, swallowing the lump of triumph and relief that threatened to choke me. Around us, the county officials shuffled through paperwork under halogen lamps set up by the press, ensuring that every charter, signature, and bylaw Holly had manipulated was nullified. I overheard one reporter ask the township clerk, "Does this mean all Pinecrest HOA fines are void?" The clerk glanced toward Holly's cruiser idling at the driveway's mouth and answered, "Every last cent. And any future attempts to revive that HOA charter will be met with legal action." The relief was palpably a collective exhale from neighbors who'd felt strangled under Holly's quotas and quotas of arbitrary rules. As the deputies closed Holly inside, she pounded on the glass, shrieking accusations that we were criminals, that we'd stolen her authority, that she had rights. But the county judge's ruling was clear. Her charter was revoked, her fines were voided, and any assets she'd acquired under false pretense were to be returned. In that moment, Holly's shouts became nothing but the desperate bleating of a dethroned queen stripped of her scepter. Beneath the porch light, I set the wooden sign into the ground, its stake cracking the earth. Neighbors gathered around, pressing fists against the rough wood, offers of congratulations tumbling into the night like confetti. Someone lit a lantern. Its warm glow washed over us, gilding faces with hope. A teenage girl held up her phone, live streaming the scene to thousands who couldn't be here, her voice breathless as she narrated every detail. I watched her, remembered my own teenage rebellions, and felt a swell of pride that our community's youngest would witness justice firsthand. Then a shadow slid from behind a white birch. Mrs. Langley, the retired schoolteacher who'd been the first to question Holly's edicts, and she held aloft a weathered notebook bulging with affidavits from cabin owners. "This changed everything," she cried, her voice cracking. "Your actions gave me courage to speak out." The notebook passed from neighbor to neighbor, each adding their signature in ink, each imprint a declaration of solidarity. A low murmur arose, building into cheers as the crowd embraced one another, tears glistening in the lantern light. For a moment, I dared to imagine the years of silent suffering being washed away in that single instant of unity. Yet even as celebration rippled through Pinecrest Lane, a nagging fear tugged at me. Would the peace last? Holly had been only the most brazen face of entitlement in this region. What if another Karen rose to fill her void? I closed my eyes and exhaled, grounding myself in the cedar-scented breeze off the lake. Justice had been served, but gratitude was only the beginning. I turned to my neighbors and raised my voice. Let's rebuild our community on respect, on open dialogue, on honoring each other's rights. Let's promise never to let fear of reprisal keep us silent again. A chorus of yes rose in response, hands gripping the air in solidarity. In the crowd, I spotted Sheriff Cole, tall, stern, often the only figure between Holly's whims and real violence, nodding with approval. He approached, lowering his voice. "Nice work," he said quietly. "You made a difference." I shook his hand firmly, mindful of the miles of paperwork and court sessions that lay ahead to ensure Holly's misdeeds were fully unraveled. "I couldn't have done it without my community," I replied. He nodded, and as he stepped back into the glow of his cruiser's taillights, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. But it wasn't a burden. It was a promise to protect what my grandfather had built. Months later, Silverpine Lake hummed with the rhythms of summer kayaks gliding, fishermen casting lines, families picnicking by the shore. The cabin stood open, front doors swung wide, and impromptu potlucks formed under strings of solar lights. A new HOA committee was elected, volunteer, transparent, focused on maintenance and community events, rather than enforcement of obscure decorum rules. I served as its chair, determined to guide Pinecrest Lane toward a future where voices were heard before bylaws were enforced. And every evening I returned to the porch, rested my palm against that wooden sign, and remembered the night we reclaimed our rights. Holly's trial dates loomed on the courthouse calendar, her racketeering and fraud charges carrying the threat of hefty fines and jail time. But for me and my neighbors, the victory had already been won. Under the same sky where Holly once cast her shadow of tyranny, laughter now rippled across the water like a melody of freedom. I discovered that justice wasn't a single act of retaliation, it was an ongoing commitment to stand up, speak out, and hold power accountable. As the sun set on another perfect day, I scrawled a fresh motto on the chalkboard by the cabin door. Your voice matters, use it. It was an invitation to every neighbor, every visitor, to join in, and a reminder that when entitlement threatened to overshadow community, the best defense was unity and unwavering resolve. So I ask you, reader, when someone wields power unjustly, will you stay silent or will you raise your voice and spark the change your world needs? Share your thoughts, right or wrong.